How old are these, John?
These were planted in 2002, so they're like 8th leaf. I think they're going to be 7th leaf this coming season. Don't pick on my support system.
I want to see it stand up.
Yeah.
Well, this is really essentially what we're talking about. This is a little bit closer spacing than what we think is the optimum economic spacing, but from a horticultural standpoint, it looks wonderful. And this is a testament, I guess, to the fact that you can manage apple trees with 2-foot spacing, 3-foot, 4-foot, 5, whatever. So don't be worried if you haven't managed apple trees at the 3- and 4-foot spacings that I was suggesting, because this is testament that it can be done at even closer. The only reason we don't plant more of this, and I have to back up and say our largest grower in New York, the Fowler brothers, this is what they plant. But they're growing their own trees. And it's just because of the expense that we're not suggesting it for the vast majority of growers. If you widen out the spacing a little bit to 3 and 4 feet, tree density per acre reduces from the 2,500 that this, well, the rows here aren't as close as the 10 feet, but still, normally these are 2 by 10 is the super spindle. That's about 2,300 trees to the acre, so you can reduce that down to the 900 to 1,000 to 1,100 with the tall spindle spacing of 3 or 4 feet. But the type of tree is exactly the same. A dominant trunk, no large scaffold branches, and one of the good things is that John's pruned and the Wes or whoever's pruning here, they've taken off big branches in the past. So if you look up and down these trunks, you see a number of places where they've removed branches. There's not a single branch on those trees that's over ½ an inch in diameter. So the pruning is very simple. We have this large grower in New York that plants this. He wants to keep costs down. So he contracts the pruning. He tells they're Mexican pruners, he says, I'll pay you a penny a cut, but I'm only going to pay you for 2 cuts on every tree. So it adds up the trees in the row, times them by 2 pennies, and that's what it costs per row. Now, that's reducing cost to about $40 an acre. Maybe it's a little too cost adverse. But you're not too far from that on these trees. Any one of these trees you could take. I would apply the same 3 rules I talked about with tall spindle. Pick the height of the tree that you want, and then normally it's 9/10 of the row spacing. Now, they have a little bit wider row than optimum, so they can go a little bit taller than 10 feet. What's the row spacing, John?
Well, it was originally supposed to be, I think 12. It varies a little bit, so
if
12.
It's 12, that's 10.5 feet, 90% of 12. So let's say that's about right up to here. We just pick the height that we want. Now this tree doesn't need to be cut because it's relatively calm, but just to make the point, we would probably try to cut that off right there, that side branch. Look up and down the tree, any of the 2 largest branches we'd take out. This one really doesn't have any large branches, so there's nothing to take out. And then my last step is just columnarize each branch. We come down, we're just going to make a single axis on each branch. This one here has a V, will form right there. It's only going to have 1 axis. This one here forks out here. I don't care which one you pick. It's got 3 sides. We'll just pick one of the sides, leave it. Still forked out there. Columnarize it. Every branch gets columnarized. If you do this for a couple of years, just columnarize it. This one right here is forked in this sort of a, now side branching creates the shading that hurts this branch. Columnarizing it, just take it down to a single axis right there. Now the fruits that hang on there get light from both sides. The same with this lower one. That one over there is fine. Columnarize it, and we're done. Columnarize that. What I hope to have is about 15 branches on this tree. Each one of them have just a column of fruit, and I can get light in and around those. But basically, John, you got a wonderful, calm tree here that requires almost no pruning.
I made a mistake. Actually, these are B9s, and these cameo and B9s would be extremely good.
I thought for sure you'd take this one out of here, but you don't do it for the year, huh?
Yeah. I think that if it was maybe, that's maybe almost ½ an inch. It gets up to 3/4 is what I'm looking at.
Do you get to a point on a tree like that, Terence, where you're concerned about having young enough growth and so that you might make 2 cuts just for the sake of trying to sprout some young wood
Sure.
over time?
But I think it's more of a problem with small fruited varieties. Camille's not particularly small fruited. You have John Gold in this, I love that. Fuji's fairly large fruited, even McIntosh. But if this was Gala, then we start to get worried that there's too much small wood. And hopefully we'll see some Gala.
Well,
here.
we do actually. Let's do it. I forgot. We got Gala right here, next door. These are Galas on M9s. If you want to look at that and kind of, you guys are all there. We're coming over. These are Galas on M9.
Over the wire. Looks like a wire cut.
Just pull your way through there. Doesn't matter.
So you can maybe talk about Gala a little because it's a little different.
So Gala trees often are top growth heavy. And so it's more important on Gala to try to get rid of any big wood in the top. And so I'm much more strict with that variety to set the height and take off any strong. Now that side branch there is a really nice shoot, but it's a little bit too vigorous. And so that's one of the branches I'll take off. And this other branch up here is a little bit too vigorous. The ones that I want are these right here, these two and that one. When I come down, I look at this as a really nice side branch. This is a little bit too vigorous. So on Gala, we really want to make the top thin and narrow, but the top's the right height, so I don't need to cut it. I've taken off strong branches in the top. I'm going to work my way down. I'm going to columnarize the things. There's not too much columnarizing to do. It's all pretty well columnarized. All wonderful. But my fourth rule is the Gala rule. And that's most clearly evidenced here on some of these trees, in particular this branch right here. This branch had a number of apples on it. It did great. It's now bent down in a pendant position. And the last part of this branch is what grew this year, is now much thinner than a pencil. This is what I call penciling down. The problem with Gala is that bud will be floral, plus these lateral buds here will be floral. You'll have so many flowers on little tiny wood that you end up with small apples. So what we try to do is with the pruning shears, drop a number of those buds on the ground so we can get the remaining buds to produce reasonable sized fruit. So we end up going through the tree, cutting back branches till they're pencil size. Now, maybe that's a small pencil, but that's the kind of cut we would do. And so we just, when we have time, we would try to do that. Now this is a wonderful branch, but it's penciled down so much here on the end. It just have way too many apples. We're going to try to cut that back. And so there's a lot more of this tipping back with Gala to try to get back into some reasonable sized wood. That's probably okay. Probably will leave that with new. But this kind of wood here is so small and so full of flower buds that if you leave it, you just have a small fruit problem.
Can I interject briefly? I will say one thing, one problem I'm seeing, I think, with this, and Terence, maybe you can talk about it, is I'm a little concerned. Some of this may be fine because of my light levels down here. You know, it looks great now, but when these are leafed out, you'd be amazed how shaded. Maybe I'm not doing quite enough pruning, but maybe, I don't know, can you talk about that at all, how you maintain? I feel I'm getting more fruit up there and less fruit down here, and I think it's because of shading.
It is.
And there may be an inherent problem with this system. North, south. Yeah. Just don't know if you got any words of wisdom.
I think it's all in the top of the tree, not letting the top get too tall.
Thin that out more.
Cut it very strictly. If you really got 12 feet here, John, it looks wider to me.
Maybe it varies a little.
Well,
Those are getting a little tall, is that what you're saying?
Let's say I can reach 8 if I can. So you really have to cut.
Some of these are getting a little tall.
Maybe, you know, that's the height you can limit. You just have to go through there. They're all a little tall. Just pick a side branch. Even if you have to cut into 3/4 inch diameter trunks, cut the tops down and then work that top so that there's no branch that really overhangs the bottom. But if you also come through the bottom and you do this shortening back, this is a great branch here. This is the perfect branch for Gala because it has still enough thickness to it and a little bit of vigor. This is where the best Gala fruits come from. These that have really gotten small really don't produce that great a Gala. So with this sort of penciled back pruning, we stub it back. We stub it back. This one we leave intact. That one was too thin. We stub it back. You know, that part's good there. This is probably getting a little thin, but we'll leave it. This one here will stub back. Columnarize that. This pendant part down here, we'll just columnarize it. Gala takes a little more detail, but if you do that, John, I think you'll get more of this kind of wood out of the bottom.
Yeah, I don't think
This is
I've
really
done that
good
in the
here.
past. All right.
It's so simple. Let's look at the little
Yeah,
more
let's-
bigger.
Terence, I got a question for you. I've done fruit set on some of these trees in here, dividing the tree into quarters and then doing fruit set. And the fruit set on the bottom quarter is significantly less, maybe a third of that which is on the top. Do you, after time, worry about set down here?
We don't necessarily worry they won't have any crop, but we've measured something similar. We did a chemical study where I sprayed in exactly this kind of tree. The top, all the chemical thinner in the top, or all in the middle, or all on the bottom, or equally distributed. Even if I put all the chemical thinning in the top, the bottom still get over thin.
Really? Because I had a theory that, I mean, when I do thin these, they're probably getting more thinner on the bottom than the top. But
The reason is shading. I think that it relates back to the carbohydrate model, Dwayne, that these buds down here don't have the same reserves, and during the day, photosynthetic production of these leaves is less than those leaves up there. So
Yeah.
those buds are supplied with more carbon. Hence, these react to the shading or any other stress more than those. They react to the thinner more than those. So, this again comes back to the pruning, making sure the top doesn't have any large branches that overhangs. And then in the bottom, trying to not leave all that really small, weak wood.
And turn the nozzles off at the bottom at thinning.
I'm saying turn them completely off. I do my study with a tower sprayer, so I'm really not blasting up through it all. I'm just spraying right in the top, and even spraying everything in the top, I still get over thinning in the bottom.
Are you actually measuring the amount of material that comes down there, or are they just
No.
thinning on natural thinning?
We're just measuring the fruit set.
Yeah, I think it's
We
just
have the
natural thinning you
unthinned-
get
No,
there.
but we
'cause-
have the unthinned to compare to, where we don't put any chemical
Yeah.
on. And there, certainly, it's what Dwayne says. We get less set, more and more, but still the bottoms are not over thin. So if we spray chemical, even if we're spraying all on the top, the bottom's still too fruit.
But you get the vigor up there. I mean, that's the difference in vigor. Low vigor tree always thins easier than a high vigor tree, and you get the low vigor down there. It's all the same tree, but it's very low vigor here down.
And it's just a question of terms. I say low carbohydrate supply, high carbohydrate supply, but it's the same sort of concept.
let's go down and look at the Geneva 16.
What about using a can you talk about using a tunnel in a situation for spraying? You talk about spraying, how we could use this kind of a tree structure for containing our drift.
That's what we did at Geneva. We purchased a sprayer that's made in Germany that goes over 12-foot tall trees in a tunnel. And it's got 8 feet long tunnel. And as it goes over, it's got fans and nozzles inside that tunnel to spray into the tree. Now, early in the season, when it's the first spray of the season, you see a little bit of wafting of spray chemical out the back of that. But once there's leaves, you just see that thing going. There's not a whiff of spray coming out anywhere. And so in terms of spray drift in public areas where people see you or next to roads, it's really the way to go. And that's another reason why you want to plant this kind of an orchard, because it's going to be adapted to that kind of thing. And if we get in these urban states greater and greater lawsuits for spray drift or whatever, you might be forced to go to these tunnel sprayers. Right now the big rage is to use tower sprayers, which sort of shoot across, but you still drive by an orchard using those and you still see a lot of plumes and stuff. These tunnels, once the leaves are there, you don't see anything. So I really like that, and I like the marriage of this with that sort of tunnel sprayer concept. Yeah, I'd invite any of you that come to Geneva to look at this tunnel sprayer we have. It looks gangly and weird. It's a huge machine.
What's
once
the
it's opened
brand
up.
on that?
What?
What's the brand?
Lipco.
Lipco.
I remember years ago, was it Lenoken Farm had one? But the one thing he found is if there was a branch sticking up, he says, we thought if it got bent over and inside that tunnel it would get sprayed. And it ended up not. And he ended up with scab in the top of his tree. Now, did they make changes to their sprayers to make sure any tall branches that bent over got sprayed?
Well, he quit using his, and he's just gone back to a one, but the change is this.
I
Okay, yeah. You don't have that now, yeah.
We prune ours exactly to fit our machine every year. We prune down to a certain height,
Yeah.
and there might be a shoot that sticks up there, but we don't have the scab problems.
I don't have a pole pruner, but you're going to
Any
just have
sort of a box to stand on, because I think really the key, there's two keys to this, and that's the top part of the thing, getting the tree height to the right side.
use a pole pruner.
Yeah, a pole pruner would be great.
Who's in the back that can run inside and get a pole pruner? That's our crew. I guess I'll do it. Go ahead.
Sorry, John. We won't wait for you because we'll tell it all. Look at the problem that's slowly crept up is just a little bit more vigor than what's optimum for this 2-foot spacing, but we can still deal with it. But we have to deal with any branches in the top. When upper branches get that long, and then they secondarily have a side branch or two on them, especially like this, they start to create shade on the lower part of the tree. So one of the answers is to try to remove at least 2 or 3 large branches from this point up. Now it doesn't matter which are the 2 or which are the 3, because you'll come back next year and do more, and you'll do more, and so every year we'll be cutting them out. The problem is people are hesitant. They look at that branch, they say, well, it's got some really nice fruit buds on it. It sure does. But you've got to be rigorous in taking that out, otherwise you start to have problems down here. The second thing is this columnarization. This branch right here was a good branch. I'm going to take it out so we can prune on it. But we either got to keep one side or the other. If I columnarize that like that, it's a much less shading issue for the tree. Plus, if I get apples hanging underneath here, they get light. But it's really kind of too big for the thing anyway. Okay, let's suppose that 10 feet is, 10 and a half feet is right here. There was a cut made last year right there. We got a nice vertical shoot on it. That's good. That's maybe the perfect height. If we just go down the row, we're going to find a lateral bud to just take them off at the 10-foot height. What are we going to do with this tree? This side branch is so big and so dominant that if the normal cut height is about right there, it's time to take off this side branch with some sort of an angle cut. We don't want that leader growing up any more than that. Now that'll produce a shoot right there, but that's okay. So we're going to set the height of each one of these trees at 10 feet, or 10 and a half feet because it's 12-foot rows.
Broke it. Another one, John.
Oh, a 10-footer.
What happened? Did it really break?
Yeah, you broke the wire.
Look at that.
I keep asking Wes for new tools, but he says no. Well, you guys got the idea, I think.
Now I got a question in regards to that cut. Would it not be easier to cut it right where the ribbon is tied and just leave that fruiting shoot up there as the old-fashioned central leader?
That's a good question.
Hope that that's going to.
You're suggesting cutting it down here?
Yeah.
Too short.
Too short? Yeah.
Yeah. Cut it up at the right height, just to a weak side branch, and then take off
Yeah.
this one
Yes.
with an angle cut, and this one with a bevel cut, and one other one. Okay, we're going to have to imagine that I'm taking it off right here, leaving this one.
Yeah.
So then my choice is to take off this one or that one.
Yeah, I'll take both.
Either one of those off. But what I'm left with is relatively weaker wood on this that is going to be very fruitful, and more importantly, I start to open up the lower part of the tree so there's not so much shading. Then we simply work our way down and columnarize the branches. That's going to be with that direction out there. This one's over here fine. This is going to be columnarized like
Stub
this.
there. Yeah. I think, we can get some regrowth.
Columnarized.
Too close. Terence,
Columnarized, yes.
let me just ask why you left that 2-inch stub up there. Did you explain that? Or did you mean to do that? Or
Yeah, I meant to do it, but maybe not quite that long. More like that. Till I can get a regrowth out of it.
Not quite so stubby.
But stubby's not bad. Even that long of stubby's okay. Look at this stub here. Really nice replacement.
Yeah, well, it's
shoot.
kind of interesting, like what this did down here,
So then we just work our way down, columnarizing each branch as we go.
You really columnarize even those to do some thinning now, and even that really small stuff.
And then the spacing on the wires, Terence, like where would you set your first wire and then the spacing between them?
That's lots of options there. If we plant the tall spindle tree and we plant them and keep them 6 feet tall when we plant them with some side branches, I like that first wire up a little higher that I can duck under. This kind of height. We also have liked a lot some sort of a training guide between them. Lots of people in Western New York are using just 2 wires now. 1 wire a little bit above hip height, 1 wire at the top, and then the training wire, soft wire placed in between them with a crimp. But at this stage you can take out this lowest wire so you can still duck underneath there real easily. There's not a lot of pruning. Get the top down and reduce the vigor in the top. So each tree you're going to try to take out 1 or 2 of these upper branches that are quite big. And then not a lot else to do. This is the kind of branch it's probably got 1 more year left, but it's divided here. I don't care if you keep this side or you keep this side, but let's just columnize it. That keeps the fruit in a narrow column and does less shading.
There's Jim.
All right, we're just about to move along.
Okay, but this argues for that self-steering platform that Tuguses have. If you can just imagine the time it's going to take me to prune this row, if I got to put my loppers down, make a cut up here with a pole pruner, seems fast. But if you're on a platform just using loppers, you're just going down the row at tree height's about right here, chest height. You cut each tree at the right height, take off 2 or 3 branches between where your foot is and about here, and it just goes fast.
It saves your neck too.
And you end up with really reduced pruning cost. So that's the way I'd leave that top of that tree. That one over there. Just leave that. And that one was all fine. This one over here's got to be reduced. This one doesn't have a good branch here at the right height to cut to, so maybe I'll just cut it back a little bit higher.
So, it's no worse than if you have in the fruit inside a bigger fruit.
A little too tall.
If it's thin, you can pick the sun coming over and reaching in. That's the time.
I want to leave the weakest branches up in the top.
Well, it's not.
Leave it fairly sparse. Summarize this thing. Well, we do use apogee in this system, and that's mostly in the top. So we would spray a directed spray above that top wire on almost all varieties where apogee works well. We use them relatively low rates, much lower than we did when we first started using apogee.
2 ounces to the 100?
3 ounces to the acre, kind of a 2 sprays of 3 ounces, so a total of 6 ounces in the year.
Just 2 sprays though.
2 sprays is all we're doing. Yeah. Where did I cut to? The top?
It's not,
Right here?
yeah.
These trees have never had any on.
It's better to be done than. If you had 2 branches, Terence, one was coming perpendicular to the row and the other in row, and you had to take one out, would you favor the in row ones that aren't coming out this way and shading?
Yes, because the ones coming out into the row are the ones that block the light in the morning or in the afternoon on the lower part of the tree. So where I have that option, I generally want to leave the ones in the row.
Yes, I will say that.
Did we get them all? Now these still have plenty of buds, so they're just tremendous bud numbers on these still.
I had sooty blotch and fly speck.
And some of those top ones, you wouldn't shorten them at all.
I prefer to not shorten them, but if I need to be, I do it. Once they're pendant, you can prune back almost anything. If it's upright, for example, that's a good question. Anything that still has an upright position, never shorten it. Either take it out completely if it's too big, or leave it. But once a branch is pendant, you can shorten it back almost any place you want to make it fit, and it really won't cause any real growth response. But the major mistake people make is trying to manage a branch that's too vigorous at the top by saying, well, I'll shorten it back to make it look good. It looks good right then, but it grows vigorous and stays in the upright position. So that's a major inviolable rule, is to never cut back on an upright branch. Well, how do they look, Andre?
They look great.
Great.
Okay.
What are you doing next week?
Well, I was going to take it out, but Andre spent time to tuck it down, so I didn't want to offend him. But you're right, just to make the point. This is really
Why don't you talk about bending after in years 2 or 3? Do you do any bending at all?
We're doing less and less. That used to be, like I said, at planting time, feathers that are too vigorous, we are bending.
Let's go look at some other
But the
trees.
goal is never to do any more hand bending tying after that.
What are you doing, John?
When you preliminarize
Take
the
a walk.
branches, do you favor a top one or bottom one? What, you know, if it's growing out like this?
Oh, yeah. Depending on the variety. On Gala, I always favor the upper one because that's where I get better fruit size. But on
Okay.
most other large fruit ones, I tend to favor the
So
ones
they're
that's
drooping
underneath,
down.
so they're more droopy.